Welcome back to Cafecito Chats. Thank you so much for joining today. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about networking. And we've mentioned it several times over the course of our conversations, hinted at it, alluded to it, but never really talked about it in more depth other than just superficial. This particular episode, this particular conversation today is going to be networking, building relationships that open doors. And it's really about who you know, but more importantly, who knows you. And that's what really matters. That can definitely help and support you and guide you to some extent, or even be an advocate for you to continue moving in your career, right? With that being said, I know that some students and some young professionals say, "Hey, I went to a networking event and I got three or four different contacts." Well, I think the networking phase for them stops at that point, and they never really do follow ups. They never really send emails. They never really foster that relationship. So, part of that is fostering that relationship and making sure that it's more about just collecting those contacts, right? But also, when you collect those contacts, is what do you do afterwards? How do you really follow up? And are you fostering and developing those relationships with those individuals? Not only for the sake of actually getting something, but the point is for that relationship to also be beneficial to the other person. You should be giving to those individuals and supporting, and maybe if they have events, attend some of those events, or if they have some sort of interest, you could definitely tap into that and say, hey, I really love, like Mr. Mike Cruz, love biking, talk about different types of bikes, talk about different trails or different road trips that you probably do, and make sure that you follow through on that. And at the end of it is like, how do you overcome the fear of actually networking with some of those individuals? Or if you're an introvert, like we've heard so many people in previous conversations say, I was really afraid to go and approach XYZ person because they have a title, a director or CEO or whatever it is that they do. And I don't really feel comfortable because I don't really feel that I'm on par with that. How do you break that fear and actually start approaching those individuals? That's the extent of the conversation today. Hopefully, we can keep providing our insights that we have, and we can share and expose some of our personal experiences. So with that, I'm gonna tap into Anna Marie. Thank you for joining us. I know that you have just recently graduated within maybe a month or a month and a half. Congratulations on your graduation with your master's from USD. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, as always.
Yeah. And you've been really involved in SWE, Society of Women Engineers, as well as SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And you've gone to a lot of networking events. And, the topic at hand today is networking and making sure that we follow through and foster some of those relationships. But from your experience, and as you have grown in those organizations and attended several events over your participation in those particular organizations, what are some of the key takeaways that you want to highlight for the audience here, and also some of the mistakes or errors that you see some individuals actually do when they attend some of those networking events? Anne Marie?
Thank you. I think from the last networking event that I went to, my biggest takeaway was that like you're saying, you don't always have to connect with people on only your job. You can connect with people on their extracurricular activities, and that you probably actually have more in common with others than you don't. So there's always some kind of link there that can make you more memorable and also galvanize that relationship. And I think being shy is not going to help you in networking, because even if you're fearful or introvert, I think that visibility is really important, and you have to be your own strongest advocate for what your strengths are and what you're trying to go after. So maybe working a little bit on that if you have that. And For for establishing and developing, I think it's also really important, like you were mentioning, to prolong that relationship and continue to support them. That even if it's not, like for example, I went to an AI workshop to support Hilda Soto. She's like a partner for marginalism, I think is what it's called. And I personally have no experience in AI. I'm not a tech girly at whatsoever, but I think it's really important to support other members and then also just to expand because you're also there as a resource for others.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne Marie. Sticking with you a little more. When you let's talk about your personal experience. When you actually go and start networking, you mentioned stop being fearful, right? So I know that you and your mom pretty much embarked you or put you on this particular path. When you were attending some of those events as a young individual, I'm pretty sure that that was a little bit of a out of place situation for you to some extent, right? How did you deal with that fear of really approaching and talking to some of those engineers that were either at SWE or at ship events?
Even with my mom as my mentor and all of the great mentors that I've had, yourself included, Mr. Cruz included, I have still stumbled maybe in certain networking contexts. Like, for example, I'm surrounded by aerospace engineers. I don't know anything about aerospace engineering, and that's not even the track that I'm interested in either. But I think that it's really important to still kind of stand your ground and not defensively, but out of like your contribution to yourself and to your community. I think that justifies your seat in being there and being like a general STEM advocate. So think about it in the scope of like how you're helping others, and then maybe it's not so much that you're insecure about yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, great insight, great perspective. Diego Martinez, thank you for joining us. I apologize. You know, there's he reminded me that Argentina and England are playing today at this just about this moment. So thank you, Diego, for making time and joining us in this insightful conversation about networking. Uh, can you give us some insight as to how to foster and develop those relationships once you get the individual's contacts when you actually go to a networking event? Diego Martinez?
Yeah, so first things first, the score is currently 0-0.
Okay.
And then to answer your question, I think honestly, what Anna Marie said, it's, just paying attention to those little tidbits, of, the interests of the contact that you got. And then kind of like what we said already, just try to foster a relationship out of that. And, continue to find common interest and talking about those things, because at the end of the day, those are the conversations that are the most memorable. You know, and I've heard it time and time again from various workshops that I went to back when I was at UCSD. A lot the professionals, they said, I'll remember you more, if we have a conversation about something that wasn't even, about work or about the company that I work for, or vice versa. Or if we are talking about the company that I work for, then it would be, it would be that a lot about the company that I work for, and then that's how you become memorable. So just continuing to pay attention. And that's something that I'm learning now as a professional, as I transition from networking as a student to now networking as a professional. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay. Can you give us some examples now that you're in the professional realm? I'm assuming that you've gone to a couple networking events and you meet some of the students, and now you're in that opposite role where now you're talking to the students as a professional yourself, not necessarily looking for a job, but the students are actually looking up to you and saying, "Ooh, Diego Martinez can definitely hook me up and possibly get me in, or refer me, or something along those lines." What is your experience so far, and what do you see now that you're like, "Oh man, okay, I wish the students would do this a little bit different? Diego?
Uh, well, students haven't approached me in that capacity yet.
Okay.
They definitely, yeah, I mean, they're more so, if a student asks, if when a student's approach me, it's actually more asking me about my college experience. And so those are most of the questions that I get. And thankfully, college is still fresh in my brain, so I'm able to help them out. But one thing I will say, I guess a struggle that I have is that as a student, the reason why I would network is because, I was trying to get something out of it. And, as a student, it would be a job. At least, for me, for other students, it might be an internship. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get something. But now, as I am a professional, I have a job. I'm happy where I'm at. So, now it's more networking for me is more casual conversations, which, if I'm being honest with you, I suck at. So, that's the challenge that I'm facing. It's now I'm starting to pay attention. We're like, all right, like what are these people's hobbies, and and how can I foster a relationship out of that?
Yeah. Yeah. So that being said, when you're networking, we all have trouble trying to just doing that small talk. So I definitely understand that. It's like, okay, you start off with, hey, how's it going? Where do you work? What's your, what's your title if you really want to go there? Or most of the time you start off with, how's the weather? Hey, this heat or this humidity is really killing me, et cetera, et cetera. But then all of a sudden, you run out of things to say. So for that, I'm going to turn over to Paul Montoya Sr. Paul, thank you for joining us. You're experienced. You're an experienced individual. You have a very large array of conversation topics, and I want you to help us and give us some of your expertise on how to break the ice and overcome that fear of actually beginning networking and making sure that you carry on the conversation.
Yep. So first of all, Lazaro, thanks for, as always, these Cafecito chats. I hate it when I miss them because I love them and they're awesome. And I miss you guys. And Michael Cruz, what's up? Another way, you don't know my address, Lazaro. You don't know my address. But thank you for the intro. Paul Montoya, lifetime member. I don't know. I wasn't number 1 and 2 like Byron and his wife, but I was somewhere in the early 2005 range. Fell in love with SHIP freshman year at Arizona State. I'm a member, and I was also the president, and the RSR, and the vice NSR, and the NSR. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I did the board thing for a couple of years. Kicked butt, take names, kind of retired in '08 when I had a family and 4 kids. And those kids are now graduated. You know my story. Paul Jr. is running around, 21-year-old. He's been in corporate America 2 years. He didn't want to knock out all the PhDs. So the last couple of years, I took a master's. I'm technical enough. So I did a master's in, I wanted a PhD in leadership because I have a passion for leadership, but I had to get a master's first. So I picked organizational management. And you talk about networking and breaking the ice. And, that's interesting because when corporate America was kind of like, and still is, Microsoft AI is taking over, Anna Marie, AI. So if you can't beat them, join them. So I have the coolest thing I'm doing right now. And I got my hands in a lot of pots. I'm always multitasking. And the coolest thing I'm doing right now is because of my entrepreneurship endeavors, where I was selling soap and shampoo like the Avon lady. Still doing that, by the way. Some of the stuff's in the background, but it enabled me to work on my communication skills. And I reached out to guys that I was working with 20 years ago, and said, "Hey, you got to know who I know and more." And so we got to talking, and he's actually on this call. I'm looking forward to him and talking. I knew him as a junior, as an associate project manager back in my EMC days. And for those of you who don't know, Dell bought EMC for $67 billion in 2016. So people like us and Ernesimo, we made that company. We made that a reality for Dell to get him a seat at the big boy table. Hewlett Packard, Dell, and who's the third one? The big 3, IBM. So those are the big 3. Everyone else circulates that environment. So you guys want to make it in corporate America? That's easy. Ernesimo's, I rub O's with him, and he's got 6 degrees, and he's talking to me about agentic AI and making it happen, and he invited me to be that, so I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. And super exciting, we're going to AI4 which is the largest AI conference in August, and we're a startup, and we're looking for the funding so we can make it rain, play with drones, do all this awesome stuff, and hire like 40 engineers. It's going to be epic. But and all that happens with networking. You can be the smartest engineer in the world, but if you don't work on your communication, your relationship skills, you might as well not. And the other thing is that, you know, one of my mentors said to me, if you know how to read and you don't read, you might as well not know how to read. And I hate reading. I'm one of those engineers. I hate reading because I just listen to the Audible, please, just to get the knowledge. But I'm trying, right? You break it out 15 minutes a day, and the compound effect really is exactly that. In 5 years, you won't even recognize yourself. So networking. It's not what you know, it's who you know, but more importantly, who knows you. So,
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a topic at hand, right? You know, the networking portion is not just collecting those names, but actually getting to know those people, but allowing them to get to know you so that they can actually refer you and give you some of that support and maybe advocacy to some extent if it comes down the pipeline at whatever capacity later on in the future. Onesimo, thank you for joining us, sir. Perspective on networking and any guidance that you can give us or any insights from your experience.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Lazaro,
Nice to meet you, sir.
Mr. Herrera. My name is Onesimo Padilla. I'm an Arizona native, and you know, I grew up in the North Country, and you know, did a lot of hands-on stuff like welding, construction. I even worked for the railroad for a number of years, right? And I became a construction manager for the railway company, and it was really one of the best jobs I ever had in life. As a young man when you're raising a family, right? But, you know, at some point in time, I wanted to leave the railroad because of just the politics and stuff. So I said, you know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find an opportunity that really lands with me. So I ended up getting a job with the phone company here in Arizona. It was Quest, US West, Quest, CenturyLink, Lumen, whatever. And I worked there for a while and, you know, met a lot of people I still network with today. Right? Because my company is Hasnetics, and what we're building is hazard resiliency for military and commercial applications for business, right? And it's all about, you know, containing hazards when they start, identifying them, detecting them, and then operationally dealing with them, right? So I was talking to one of the guys I worked with at the railroad, and he says, I work at the FRA, the Railroad Federal Railroad Association, right? And me and this guy, we went through training together in Johnson Community College to become railroad signal engineers, right? And you know, I still remember those days when we were just drinking beer in the room, studying, because we knew that at the end of the 2 weeks, if we didn't pass the test, we would no longer have a job, right? So we focused, man, but we made sure we had our brewskis and we built that camaraderie. And today I'm still working with people like that, right? I went through the MBA college hire program at Microsoft, and I'm still connected with a lot of people at Microsoft. And when I network with these folks, I'm able to get them on a phone and just talk to them about what I'm doing and show interest in what they're doing and really try to collaborate on paths forward, right? And like Paul mentioned, that's kind of where we landed together. He was reaching out to me with opportunities. I said, hey, well, that's cool. I'm building 2 AI companies, right? And, you know, I got a buddy, he's a co-founder I used to work with at Citrix Networking, right? He reached out. He's like, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. I said, well, I'm building an e-commerce platform, but I have this back burner idea to fight forest fires and other hazards. And so I started talking to him, and he's got all this experience with public safety and all these other elements that just landed well. And he had passion and to what I was doing. So he's now my co-founder and CTO. He's built out, we've been working on this for like 12 months now. And, you know, we brought Paul on board because Paul is a really, he has the gift of gab, I like to say, right? Yeah, you know, he can quiet a room and still the show, and people will listen, and he's always has something intelligent to say. So he's on board, and you know, it's all through networking, right? The people that we meet along the way, but at the same time, I struggle, right? I've had success stories with networking, but at the same time, I have this imposter syndrome that I deal with, and I deal with like, man, all I need to do is reach out to this guy. I've got a VP at Microsoft, maybe he would hire me in his AR department, and give me a really cush job. I can get a W-2 income, whatever. But I choose not to do it because I'm just working on what I'm working on. And I realize time is the most valuable thing we have, and we have to use it wisely because, if we don't do it right the first time, we got to go back and do it again, right? And nobody wants to go back and do it again and waste more time. So get in there, do it right the first time. If you want something, somebody who's there at the company you want to work at, start the conversation, just pick their brain. You don't have to like right away be asking for a job or but just show it, authentic interest in the other person, and you'll be surprised how that relationships can grow and prosper. Yep.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna stick with you here for one or two more questions. How do you foster those relationships once you make those connections, right? You mentioned that with one of your friends, you actually, studied together and chit chatted and whatnot. But how do you advise or provide any guidance on how to foster those relationships once you establish that connection first?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think it's important that you don't really be so focused on you, right? I've read all the books on Paul's bookshelf over there, and one of the things that you learn when dealing with people is they want to talk about themselves and what they're working on. And you know what? If you can, as an individual, take yourself out of your egocentric viewpoints and say, hey, I'm going to listen and I'm not going to talk about me, but I'm going to truly listen to this person and understand what they're talking and build the conversation around what they're talking about. That's going to be the dynamic that's going to change the situation. Because I can sit here and tell you about this wonderful company I'm building, the 6 college degrees I went through because I felt like I needed to get these different skill sets to advance my career. But the fact of the matter is all you need to do is focus on one thing and get very good at it. And it has to be something that you like. And that conversation will come up as you learn to understand the other person, and then they'll say, "Hey, what about you?" Because now they're interested in you because you've listened to them. You've given them your time and your ear, and you acknowledge what they said. Oh yeah, that's cool. I did that before. You're involved in the conversation too, right? If you're just a soundboard, good luck with that, right? Nobody wants to talk to somebody who's not listening or is on their phone when you're talking to them. That is my true talent. Is when I'm talking to you, I'm not doing anything else. If I'm in a work meeting, I'm not multitasking. I'm listening to the people around me because I want to understand so that when I reach out to that person later, when I'm networking, I bring up something that we talked about that resonates with them. Hey, you know what? When we were on that call the other day, Lazaro, you asked me this great question and it really landed well with me. You know, hey, and it just helps, right? So understanding the other person, knowing who you're talking to, and most importantly, knowing your audience, right? What they're interested in. And if you don't know anything about it, try to learn a little bit about it. Real quick, I'll tell you, when I worked for the railroad, my boss, he was big on hunting. I grew up hunting, but until they stole all our guns from my house and went on vacation, right? We came home, all our rifles and everything was gone. Now we got to start all over, right? So it kind of went by the wayside, Let's go fishing instead, right? But I'm gonna tell you, it just changes the dynamic, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
Next question.
awesome. Thank you, Onesimo. Great insight, great perspective. I'm gonna move on over to Ken Winto. Ken Winto, thank you for joining us. For today's topic, networking, how and what advice would you provide to young individuals, early career professionals about starting a conversation to get going and networking and developing those lasting relationships? Ken?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think everyone's experience will be a little different. I think that before you approach someone, you might want to think about what is your objective, like what are you trying to get out of that person's interaction. Are you trying to network with the company that they're representing? Or for the purpose of acquiring an internship or a position, or are you only trying to network to get to know the company? I think those things are important. So also, in order for you to kind of help you with that, you should also know about yourself. Like, are you currently in a position for you to even accept a position if you get offered? Are you willing to relocate? Are you willing to negotiate your, your whatever salary they may offer? Are you willing to go more down, more up? Know all those things in the background of your head before you just go out there, so that whenever you get asked those questions or whenever it comes up in the conversation, you know how to answer those questions. I think knowing that about yourself first before you kind of go and try to network, I think that's really important. Um, at least from my perspective, I think that has really helped me, because in my situation, I'm very a little bit very narrow in terms of what I want to do. And so if I see another person who may be representing a company or wherever, whatever it may be, whether I'm interested in that company or not, if it doesn't align, like if whatever offer or whatever comes out doesn't align with what I want to do, that connection could happen, but I may not be interested in fostering that relationship further, to be honest. And I also think it's also good if like it shouldn't feel like forced. It should be natural, because if you really try to force it, I think it's going to show. And that other person will also know as well, because I think that other professional will be also used to networking if they're already in a career first. So they may have already seen a lot of different people before you, or even on different days, different years. They may have already attended a career fair. They already have gone through all that, scenario. So I think ultimately it will depend on what you want to do first, and then once you know those things very clearly, then you can go out and try to network and do those things. And I think that would really help. At least for me, that's what helped me. I try not to force any relationship of any kind. I try to make it feel natural, and I have to always tie it back to what my goal is and where I'm going, instead of just whatever goes with the wind, to see if plan or land whatever. So I think those would really help. Yeah, in my
That's
perspective.
an interesting perspective and a good insight as to just not networking for the sake of networking and building and accumulating those contacts, right? If you are really specific and know what you really want to achieve and know those individuals, you can definitely target what you really want to achieve by speaking to XYZ individuals, right? And who do you really establish those conversations with and carry fostering those relationships? Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, and also I wanted to add, and not that I also want to sound too narrow, but just kind of adding to what you guys have said before, because I also agree with what you guys say. But when we put it in practice, like for example, if we go to the career fair at the national conference, you're not gonna have enough time to talk to every single person there. You're gonna have to wait in line, right? You have to, go through try to find the place that they're gonna be at. You have all this time-consuming, events or windows of time that you're not going to be exactly facing with that person. Even if you send a message on LinkedIn, that person may not get to that message until way later, or they may not respond at all. So you may have added a connection, but how concrete is that connection? Again, it ties back to what you want to do. If from the beginning you say, okay, I'm not going to talk to everyone in the career fair because I don't have time, but I have a list of the people that I want to talk to, or the company's representatives that I want to talk to, so that I can get something out of it. Then once I did everything in the list, then maybe I can go hit up other companies that might not have been in my list, but I might also be interested, so I can continue growing the network, for fostering if someone's interested in that, like more further, but not without first having yourself first and saying, okay, this is where I'm going. Was I successful with my objective for this networking event? Did I got what I came for? I think that's also very important, as well. Yeah, I think.
So being intentional with what you really want to achieve, and as Onesimo said, time is essential, right? And you have to definitely keep tag on what you really have as far as time and how you really want to invest it and who you want to invest it with to some extent. And obviously, some connections you might be like, okay, I'm talking to this individual, but I don't know exactly if it's going to lead to a lot of effort, a lot of support for them or for me. So I don't really know, be kind to the conversation, but at the same time be open to connecting, but also be strategic and to some extent be a planned individual. Ken?
Yes, and then the last thing I said, not to sound like I'm repeating things, but again, this is also because I think just like as I think Paul was mentioning, and he mentioned corporate America, doing it in US is also going to be very different than working in other countries, and I think that's the reason why I do it this way, because sometimes in other countries, something is asking for a certain opportunity may sound more serious, while in the US, it may just sound, oh, you're just following this scenario. Well, as when I go to networking events in Japan, you have to be in a certain list, you have to be in a certain category to even sign up for certain things. If you're not in a specific field, sometimes it's not open for the public. Sometimes you have to be in a certain area. And then if I go and I talk to them about, I'm interested in such and such program, they can give me some general information, like, anywhere in the world, but and other opportunities, it can go to more, more if you have a specific timeline. If I say, okay, I want to be in your program at this date, at this hour, like at this day, this time of year, more something more concrete. The only way I would know that if I did my research first and I knew, okay, well, this is where I see myself, this is where I want to be. And so then I took the initiative and I went there and I talked to them and then I did all those, then that has a more stronger relationship. Well, as if I just, didn't know and I just attend the career fair and I'm talking to one person and another person. So I think that's, a little bit different in terms of the experience you're going to get and how feasible those opportunities you're actually going to get. Because at the end, you can only be in one place at once.
Mm-hmm.
You can be in 5 different places at once.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Great insight, great perspective. Shifting over to Mr. Mike Cruz. Mr. Mike Cruz, from the whole conversation about networking, what are your thoughts? Any insight that you wish to provide at this moment?
I have I've got plenty of thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what Anna Marie was talking about. If you're like an introvert and you're not
Mm-hmm.
outgoing,
Right.
I think some of those people have the degrees, they have the education, and they may have some little bit of experience. And I think I'm going to propose a thought. I think they think things are going to happen to them because they've done their academics. They think that, being there, they don't have to go out and they don't have to network and talk with people and cajole and whatever. They think things are kind of I think the simple response is probably not going to happen if you're looking for a job. You got to step forward. You got to ask questions. You got to get involved with other people. So for those that don't feel comfortable networking and working with other people, you got to do it. Take some communication classes or something to help you develop those skills in communicating with other people. So networking. So I'm thinking after my 30-some year career with networking, a lot of that came not seeking other people, but just doing your job. As you do your job, you meet new people, and all of a sudden your field of interactions is really going to increase. And so you need to nurture every each and one of those meetings with other people in your work life. They may not be the exact line of work that you do, but you never know what they can bring to you. They may give you another contact. They may bring somebody in that you never thought of. And as you meet new people and you talk with them, I agree with Onésimo and Paul and all that. You talk about them. And I just had a meeting with this last weekend with some people I've never met before. Some I did, and you sit with them for a while. You talk, and you say, why are you here? What's your business? What keeps you busy? I always ask somebody, what keeps you busy? A non-informal introduction, and I know that either they're retired or they're still working, and you kind of say, and be interested in what they're telling you. Like when this, when they say, "Hey, I do this kind of work," and you got try and find questions related to that technology or that business cycle or whatever, and show some interest in that. Yeah, you may have no idea at all, but again, I think everybody has a little bit of knowledge about a little bit of everything. And so as you get into conversations with other people, you can go down so many different paths of conversation and get involved. And I think as you do that more and more, it gets easier and easier. But the thing is, you got to nurture every meeting of a new person in your sphere of work. So you never know who's going to bring what to you. And networking is important as you meet people, get those contacts. I know everybody has a QR code now on LinkedIn. The students told me a couple. Matter of fact, Paul was at that Region 2 meeting, and I was giving a student my business card. He looked at me and goes, "Mr. Cruz, no, QR code." I go, "I don't have a QR code." He says, "Yes, you do. You're on LinkedIn, right?" I said, "Yes." Then he showed me where the damn thing was. I said, "Oh, that's me." Yeah, phone to phone, and use that, because that's a technique or availability today, that when you meet somebody, always remember to get the QR code on LinkedIn from them. I think that's the quickest way to keep contact. And it's not real personal, but at least it's the first step in connecting with people, and then you can follow up with that. So everything that is said beforehand, be interested in other people, acknowledge them, and keep yourself in the background, and it'll all come to fruition. So, and I'm thinking my networking is not during college years, but during working years, meeting new people and keeping those relationships going, because I had to work with people across the United States, and then once you start working with them, if anything comes up, you almost establish a personal relationship with those people. And I think that's what you keep, like Onesmo, like your drinking buddy back in the day, he's your friend, man, and if something comes up, he may be able to give you a helping hand, and vice versa. So always be ready to help when you get that call.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Great insight, great perspective. Ken, you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, I wanted to say something else on a different lines than what I said also before. Even though what I said before, I also still mean what I've said before. But while you're starting to network, I think it's also important to keep an open mind, because before you can have a narrow mindset, or like a narrow goal, like I was mentioning, you might want to first explore and see like what is it that you like, what you don't like, because you might not know right away, okay, well, I like this or I like this. The way you find out is through like exploring different areas, and sometimes the first step will be to explore those areas, which means you have to create certain connections, or sometimes certain connections might see some potential in you before you kind of know that that where you want to go, and then that person can reach out to you, and then now you have to be more open to what that you guys were saying, you have to listen to that person's point of view, see let them explain to you maybe what they saw in you, so that you can maybe get an opportunity to where they may want you or where they saw you at, and then that can help you also advance. And then as you get getting more of those experiences, then you can kind of start seeing, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And now with some more networking experience and more maybe research or internship experiences in your belt, then now you can do another type of a level or a perspective of networking, that where you, back to what I was saying, that now you can know what's your objective, what's your intention, and go out and seek those opportunities with more networking experiences. If that makes sense, or if I explain myself well to get that point across.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. That's great. During the whole conversation, one of the books that keeps on popping in my mind is Dale Carnegie's "Making Friends and Influencing People." That's it's one of the basics, and if you've never read that, I encourage you to actually read it. I'm pretty sure that Paul Montoya and Onesimo and Mr. Mike Cruz, they were shaking their head and they were affirming that that's the book that they've all read. It's an easy read. It's a fair, fast read. So Making Friends and Influencing People has a lot of those networking tips that you've heard here. Moving on to Wally Lozano. Sir, any insights in networking and fostering some of those relationships during the conversation that we've had, or anything that actually sparks your interest or that you want to share insight on? Wally,
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Um, I think the first thing you always want to start is understanding who you are. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Um, Sometimes we're talking about young people in school. So when I was in school, I did a part of a program. I had to take a professional development course, and so the whole thing was looking at our what our strengths or what our weaknesses. So we took a lot of personality tests to kind of get an inference of the kind of person and kind of things that we're attracted to. I think before you start going on to networking and practicing, practicing and kind of getting to know others is really understand who you are, and have an idea of what you want out of your own life. What are your own goals? Like I said, and I was fortunate enough to have taken that course. It was part of a program that I had to do in order to do an internship experience at UCLA. Um, And so not everyone is going to have that access. But what I'm saying is that even if you don't have access to a course, is to really start looking at taking a writing course or taking an acting course, things that are going to challenge you as engineers. As engineers, we're really good at looking at problems, identifying problems, refining it, coming up with solutions, and that's all great. I think one of the things that comes up very difficult is really being analytical in understanding ourselves. So the first thing is understand who you are and what do you want. And it doesn't mean that you can't change, but rather it's understanding that you can be dynamical and you're going to grow. Um, the second thing is understanding context, right? Different arenas are going to require you to perform differently. If you're going to an AI conference, then you kind of want to talk about more gearing towards maybe trying to find some experience that you've had towards AI. If you want to gear towards more a conference where it's business related, you want to explore more about entrepreneurship. Um, the reason I say this is because the way that I handled going to a general network, like a ship or a SWE or an IEEE organization, is very different when I went to a STEM conference to get a job. I approached those two things differently. One was more relaxed, more open, like some people were you guys mentioning, being respectful, and I cannot stress this enough. Smile. Just smile, show that you are happy to be there, have your shoulders pulled back, your hands are open, you're ready to receive what people are willing to provide you with. Because someone might give you some insight that you did not have coming in. And that's part of what I mentioned about understanding to be dynamic. Um, and the reason I say this is because moving forward, let's say when I went through that STEM conference, I bombed my first interview there. And this is with Northrop Grumman. That was one day. It was a 3-day conference in Pasadena. This was about 2023. So I was really trying to get a job. So my context was I know what I want, or I have an idea of what I want to do, but just the nerves got to me. So the next day I scheduled another interview, and rather than going from trying to run down my resume and make it, hey, give me a job, what I did is I remembered that again, I build the context of who I am. I actually built a portfolio of all the different projects that I worked on that were on my resume and some that were not. When I got to that second interview, the interviewer asked, "Oh, do you have your resume?" And I said, "Yes." "Do you want pictures or do you want words?" She's like, "Pictures? That's interesting." So I showed her my portfolio. And rather than going through the projects that I talked about in my resume in school, uh, she was talking to me about one of the projects I worked on a motorcycle. I rebuilt a motorcycle on my own, not 100% like the engine, but there was a lot of wiring. I'm an electrical engineer. I was fascinated by it. My brother passed it on to me, and I said, "Yeah, I'll work on this." Anyhow, the whole interview became about me just talking about the things that I did and the problems that I came across in that situation. Never the case. At the end, she was like, "Oh crap, we got to get to the interview." So we spent a lot of time really talking about projects, and it wasn't so much of the project, but what she was so interested was more about the storytelling. And I guess what I'm trying to say is know yourself. That way you can present it to others. And I was fortunate enough to get a job offer. So a little bit of those two things that I mentioned is understand yourself and understand the context.
Awesome. Thank you, Wally. Great insight, great perspective. You do bring something to the table that we've mentioned in the past. Knowing yourself, right? Part of knowing yourself is really understanding who you are. And part of understanding who you are is knowing your core values. And also that aligns with the pertinent companies and or the pertinent individuals, and you bring those core values to the forefront once you begin talking and sharing insights, sharing your passions. And we've also talked about personal projects and how big of an impact and role do those play when you actually are talking to recruiters and to any individuals, right? We know that colleges, for the most part, universities, they have a set curriculum. And if you stick to the curriculum, you're going to do great academically. But everybody else in your school is doing the same exact work. What sets you apart is exactly what you talked about. Having those personal projects, having that passion, talking and conveying that passion into the interview, during the conversation, making sure that you say, hey, this is what I really love to do, and demonstrating that you love to do it by showing that I'm not just following the curriculum, I'm following up with what I've learned and implementing and putting it into practice. So thank you, Wally, for that insight. Ken, you had your hand up earlier?
Yeah, I just also agree with Wally. I think me and him might have some similarities because I also agree with both points and also the portfolio, as you know, Lasra, with my, the UCSD, the binder I have, the many, ship students also have our professionals and conferences. Inside of mine, I also don't just have really just my resume or CV. I have my projects too. And what I do is I laminate my projects so that whenever I'm asked for whatever interview or conversation or just network, I can pull it out anytime and I laminate it so that in case I get it wet, it's still, I can still have it as neat as possible. And it's always the same things. There have several projects. This is one of them, but I have like several that I put, that are just different projects that I also put in my resume. But whenever I'm asked to talk about, when I have the visuals or the charts of what happened, the results of my experiments, I can talk to them about more like as if not exactly having a slide deck, but I'm having a visual so I can point at them and say, this is what my result, this is what I expected to have, and they can see it rather than just read it in the resume. And I also have a timeline, which I think you've seen before as well, of my past and my future trajectory. That also helps tell the storytelling because that one sets more of the time. Like this is what sets it in time. Like this is when it happened, like when it happened relative in my career as well. And then this is more like the project is more like this is what actually happened that you can see it. That if I were to publish something, a paper or give a presentation, this will be the visuals that you will be seeing. And now I have it right away. So before I even get asked whether I want to have an interview or not, I have already provided a story, something they can remember me with visuals. And I have clicked, do you have a resume up the checklist? Because sometimes resumes, if they're going to get a lot of them, like you mentioned, the curriculum's the same as other students, you're already going to maybe have that checklist. Okay, this has a resume, this other guy has a resume, this goes to the same school, this is the same school, this is the same major. How do they stand apart? And I think this is a really good way to also stand apart because another thing I've noticed is that sometimes students think, oh, my projects, my labs is just coursework. So it's not going to count. And, I think those projects actually do count. And it's actually one of those experiences that you can keep adding as projects. Even if it wasn't for a class or if it was for a class good or if it was for a club or whatever it may have been, I think those definitely count. So you can definitely do that extra mile and convert it into something tangible for you to talk about. because that will set you apart. So, and it helps with the networking too.
Thank you, Ken. Great insight, great perspective. Mr. Mike Cruz, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah. We said you need to know yourself. That's easy to say. I didn't know myself until I was like 40 after I took a Myers-Briggs test. And so if you're in college or you're early working, yeah, right, Paul, the Myers-Briggs, and there was another one about, and then you really find out on a large scale who you are. And there's like 5 different categories that you get classified in. And then once you read those, you go, whoa, that's who I am. After taking the test, I took 2 different tests, and they basically came out the same. Young people need to do that. They need to take a Myers-Briggs or a personality test, because that'll tell you how people will look at you in the workforce, and how you act and how you respond. So to know yourself, don't just say I know myself. Take a personality profile, and there's several out there, and that will help you kind of get a sense of who you are and how people look at you. And if you're a manager or you're a project team leader and all that, it's going to give you some insight on how you deal with people around you. And so that's my input for today. Myers-Briggs.
Thank you, sir. Great insight. Around the room, we're going to go with Paul Montoya. Any final insights, sir?
No, but networking. Can you hear me? Networking 101. So if you can see me when you come to a meeting, you come like this. You bring. What does this mean? It means you bring somebody on your left and somebody on your right. So Onesimus on my left, Byron on my right. I got my leg over here. Arenas on my third person. So when you come to these meetings, you triple your attendance by just bringing 2 people along. You bring a friend. You go to a ship meeting, you bring a friend. You go to a whatever meeting, you bring a friend. And so, that's how you grow. That's how you network. The best way to know that someone's going to come with you to a meeting is you carpool to that meeting. You make sure you pick them up, no excuses, and you win. So that's my ending thought.
Great. Also, to add to what you said, bringing somebody to that meeting, automatically you're in the mindset of, I have a wing person, right? A person that backs me up. And that gives you, to some extent, believe it or not, more like emotionally, you're building your confidence level. And when you walk in the room, you feel that confidence, and it shows because you're exuding that confidence, because you know that, okay, I have Onesimo on my left, I have Byron on my right, and I have Irina on my back, and everybody can back me up. And if I need something, or if somebody's really talking my ear off, I can make a hand signal or a gesture and like, hey, come help me out, that lifeline help, or whatever it is. And at least you have that confidence. And that really builds you up besides just jumping in cold turkey into a conversation networking event. So thank you, Paul. Great insight, great perspective. Onesimo, any insight as we close out?
Yeah, that demonstrates good leadership right there. Good job, Paul. So I really like what Mike said, and he was talking about, reaching out to people and making sure you still have those connections. One of the things that really stood out to me, I want to share with you folks, and I wish I would have done better in my life, but a lot of you are so young, you have the opportunity, right? I can always get better. I'm never going to be younger than I am today, right? But the fact of the matter is there's so many people you meet in life, right? Reach out to them today. Go on LinkedIn, just send them a message and say, hey, man, I haven't heard from you in a while. I hope you're doing great. That's it. That is all you have to do to get the conversation started. Show a true interest in somebody. Show that you're thinking of them. Hey, man, I was curious of what you're working on. Or, hey, I saw that you posted this, right? Stay connected that way. Don't be afraid of it. Just jump into the fire and make it happen. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Great insight, Onesimo. Great perspective. Wally, any final thoughts as we close it out?
Thank everybody. I don't know how to top everybody right now, but the test I was talking about earlier was the Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I would suggest everyone do this, but I did, and I had a great success as an introvert myself. The acting class really, really got the nerves of being in front of a crowd, and even though when I already have a script, something I want to say, it's okay to think on your feet and speak by reading the context, by reading the room, because you're not going to be on, talking to somebody and just wait. I forgot what I said. Wait, what's the line again? So, as a personal challenge, these are challenges when it comes to communication across the board. So that's my take. If you could take an acting class, an introduction to acting class, just to get the jitters out, it would suit you in the long run. I think my personal experience.
So that's great insight, Wally. Thank you. Yeah, taking an acting class or a public speaking class or even going to Toastmasters definitely starts building on your confidence level, and it definitely starts accumulating and making sure that you are able to communicate a little better, and that gives you more confidence in the long run. So great insight, Wally.
Yes,
Great
Toastmasters as well.
Yep.
Even as a professional, I've gone to many of the meetings for Toastmasters. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Wally. Diego Martinez, anything to add as we close it out?
No, I think what everyone said was great, and I'll take it into account whenever I go to my next social event.
Okay, awesome. Remember taking those acting classes, my friend. Anna Marie, any final thoughts as we close it out?
I guess I'll just highlight that I agree. Genuine curiosity, always more questions. That's kind of how I operate. And also, I'll up the ante on bringing a friend and add asking someone for their expertise. And then I just wanted to say that if a connection doesn't benefit you, your exact objective or path, like you were mentioning, someone can always help bring you together with someone else. So referrals and connections make connections. So that's all I'll add.
Thank you, Annie. Great insight, great perspective. Ken, any final thoughts, sir?
I guess one at a more advanced level, I would say just try to keep an eye out for those cultural norms because I know networking can be very professional, but it also has, I believe, from at least from my experience, it has a lot of cultural norms because different countries network a little different. They have different work ethics, different norms in their work environment that may not apply to certain situations that maybe in the US it's common, maybe outside the US it's not that common. So kind of know your audience so that you can just have more of a more advanced networking. So whenever you're in some other country, you know how to approach those professionals, and that can open more doors that may not be opening in the US, but it could be opening somewhere else. But that's, I would say, a little bit more advanced. And if something maybe more basic for like beginning networking is more, as we were mentioning, knowing yourself. So finding ways, taking the initiative to know yourself first, and that would really help you gather those things about yourself, building that story for you to tell, building those, gathering those projects that you have already done to give you something to talk about, to make your experience talking with whoever it may be more impactful, and more aligned with what you want to do. So take those first steps. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. That's great insight. So predominantly for us, networking advice that we're giving, this is more for the U.S., but obviously, as Ken indicated, there's different cultural differences in networking in some locations, right? The way you approach somebody might be a little bit different. Some people don't like to shake hands, so be respectful and know your audience, right? Some people love to when they actually shake hands and they go in for a hug, so just be aware of that. Depends on the culture and the actual environment. So be aware of where you're at and what you really are getting yourself into as far as customs go in that regard. So hopefully that gives you some perspective, some insight. And with that, thank you everybody for joining Cafecito Chats. We'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Bye bye.